A deer steps onto the trail behind you. You keep walking. A few seconds later, it is still there. You stop. The deer stops too. Then you take another step, and somehow it follows again. Wild animals are supposed to fear us. A strange smell, a sudden voice, or a human shape moving through the trees should usually mean one thing: get away. So why would a wild animal ever follow a human? Sometimes it is food. Sometimes it is curiosity. Sometimes the animal has learned that people are not as dangerous as they first appeared. And sometimes the animal isn't following you at all. It is following something you are changing around it. Before we get into that, tell me where you're watching from, and if you've ever had a wild animal follow you, stay with me, because the reason may be much stranger than simple curiosity. The first mistake is assuming that an animal following a person means it likes the person. That is how humans interpret the behavior. We see a fox walking behind someone and think it wants to be friends. We see a bird approaching a hiker and assume it has lost its fear. But wild animals don't need to think about us that way. They are constantly making a simpler calculation. Is this dangerous? Is there food nearby? Is this place safe? Can I get something useful without taking too much risk? And humans can become part of that calculation. A person walking through a forest may be carrying nothing interesting, but the path might lead to water. The campsite might contain food. The person might disturb insects. The trail might be easier to travel. Or other predators might avoid the area because people are nearby. So the animal may appear to be following a human when it is actually following an opportunity. And once that opportunity keeps appearing, something important can happen. The animal starts learning. Imagine a squirrel living beside a busy hiking trail. The first person walks past, the squirrel runs. The next person comes, it runs again, then another, and another. But nobody attacks, nobody chases it, nothing bad happens. Eventually, running away every time becomes a waste of energy. So the squirrel starts waiting a little longer. Then it stops running altogether. This is called habituation. Repeated exposure to something that causes no serious harm can make an animal less reactive to it. That doesn't mean the squirrel has become tame. It has simply learned that this particular signal is not always worth escaping from. And the same thing can happen with larger animals. Wildlife living near roads, towns, hiking trails, and campgrounds may encounter humans so often that people become part of the normal background. The animal isn't thinking, humans are my friends. Its lesson is much simpler. Those things usually pass by. That small change can completely alter the distance an animal is willing to keep. But there is another force that can push that distance even closer, and this one is much more powerful. Food. A wild animal does not need a person to hand it food to make the connection. A dropped snack can be enough. An open trash can be enough. Food left at a campsite can be enough. Even the smell of cooking can become a signal. The animal sees people. Then it finds food. That happens again and again. Eventually, the connection becomes predictable. Human appears. Food might appear. So the animal starts approaching the human before the food appears. This is food conditioning. The animal isn't necessarily interested in the person. It is interested in what the person represents. A meal, a smell, a garbage bin, an easy opportunity. That is why some animals can look almost fearless around people. They aren't necessarily brave. They have learned that getting closer can pay. And this can happen surprisingly quickly. A bird may approach a tourist because people regularly feed birds. A squirrel may run toward a picnic table. A bear may investigate a campsite. A fox may repeatedly appear around homes where food is available. The behavior looks friendly from the outside, but underneath it is a calculation. The animal has learned a reward. And once that reward becomes expected, something dangerous can happen. The animal may stop keeping its normal distance. That is when curiosity can turn into conflict. But food isn't the only reason an animal might stay close. Sometimes humans provide something even more valuable: safety. Imagine a small animal living in an area filled with predators. Every movement matters. A fox could appear. A large cat could appear. A larger predator could suddenly enter the area. Then humans arrive. Some predators avoid people. Human activity changes the landscape. Suddenly, the same place that carries risk from humans may carry less risk from humans may carry less risk from something else. That creates a strange trade. Humans can be dangerous, but humans can also make other predators uncomfortable. Research into human-wildlife interactions shows that avoiding people can sometimes carry costs for animals, especially when human activity changes access to food, shelter, or other threats. So an animal may tolerate humans because the alternative is worse. It doesn't have to trust us. It only has to decide that staying nearby makes sense. And this reveals something important about wildlife. Animals are not simply following instincts written in stone. They learn, they remember, they update their behavior. And sometimes they can even learn the difference between one human and another. Think about a crow. One person ignores it. Another person throws something at it. A third regularly leaves food outside. To us, they are all just people. To the crow, they can become completely different individuals. Some animals are capable of recognizing human faces, voices, behaviors, or other individual cues. That means the lesson may not be humans are safe. It may be that human is safe, or that human means food, or even stay away from that one. This makes an encounter with wildlife much more interesting, because the animal may not be reacting to humanity as a whole. It may be reacting to what it remembers about a particular person, and memory can change behavior. A fox that repeatedly sees the same harmless person may become less cautious. A bird that has been rewarded by tourists may approach people more confidently. An animal that has been chased may remember the danger and keep its distance. The animal doesn't need to understand our intentions. It only needs to remember what happened last time. But there is an even stranger way animals can learn this information. They can learn from each other. A young animal doesn't have to personally experience every danger. It can watch another animal. Imagine a young animal watching an older one approach a human. The older animal doesn't run. Nothing happens. The young animal watches. Later, it moves closer too. It has just gained information without paying the cost of discovering it alone. This is social learning. Animals can observe the reactions of others and change their own behavior. That means fear can spread through a group, but so can tolerance. If one animal learns that humans are harmless, others may become less cautious by watching it. Over time, an entire group can become more comfortable around people. And this creates a fascinating problem. What happens when the human suddenly behaves differently? Because humans are terrible at being one consistent thing. One person feeds, another ignores, another photographs, another chases, another brings a dog, another carries a weapon. Another simply walks past. To an animal, humans send mixed signals, and that makes us difficult to classify. This may be one of the biggest reasons some animals follow us while others run. Humans are unpredictable, but we are also predictable. That sounds contradictory. It isn't. A person walking the same trail every morning can become predictable. A vehicle passing the same road every day can become background noise. A group of hikers following the same route can become part of the landscape, but the behavior of individual people can change without warning. The same trail that was harmless yesterday may contain a dog today. The same campsite that contained food last week may be empty today. The same person who ignored an animal yesterday may suddenly approach it today. Wildlife has to constantly update the calculation. Is this still safe? Is there still a reward? Should I stay? Should I leave? Should I follow? That is why a wild animal following you doesn't automatically mean it has become comfortable with humans. It may simply be testing the situation. And there is one more possibility that makes the whole behavior even stranger. The animal may not be following you at all. Humans create paths everywhere. We cut through forests. We walk along riverbanks. We clear vegetation. We build roads. We create trails, and animals notice these changes. A trail that makes life easier for us can make life easier for them, too. Less vegetation, fewer obstacles, a familiar route, a connection between feeding areas, a path toward water. So imagine a bear appearing behind hikers on a trail. It might look as though the bear is following the people. But the bear may simply know that the trail is useful. The humans and the bear have reached the same conclusion independently. This route works. That distinction is important. Sometimes humans and wildlife aren't following each other. They're following the same opportunity. And this is why wildlife can become surprisingly good at living around us. They don't need to understand civilization. They only need to understand patterns. Human appears. Trail continues. Food sometimes appears. Predators sometimes disappear. Nothing bad happens. The same thing happens tomorrow. Then the next day. Eventually, the animal builds a prediction. Humans become part of its mental map. Now imagine the strangest version of the encounter. You're walking alone through the woods. You hear footsteps behind you. You turn. Nothing. You continue. A few seconds later, you hear them again. This time you look carefully. A fox is moving between the trees. It isn't attacking. It isn't running away. It is simply going in the same direction. You keep walking. It keeps following. Now you know there are several possible explanations. Maybe it smells food. Maybe it has become comfortable around people. Maybe someone has fed it before. Maybe the trail is useful. Maybe it is curious. Maybe it has learned something about your behavior. Or maybe it is following something else entirely. You cannot know simply because the animal is close. And that is the important lesson. Wildlife behavior is not a friendship test. An animal approaching you can still be frightened. A habituated animal can still be dangerous. A food-conditioned animal can become aggressive. And a curious animal can change its mind in a second. So the safest response is not to assume the animal wants contact. Give it space. Let it decide where it wants to go. Don't feed it. Don't chase it. And don't turn a strange encounter into an invitation. Because the animal may be making a decision that has nothing to do with friendship. It may simply have learned that being near humans sometimes works. So why do wild animals sometimes follow humans? There isn't one answer. Sometimes they follow food, sometimes they follow a familiar trail. Sometimes repeated exposure has made humans less frightening. Sometimes human activity changes the landscape in a useful way. Sometimes animals learn from other animals. Sometimes they recognize individual people. And sometimes they're simply curious. But the deeper explanation is much more interesting. Wild animals are constantly learning what works. If following a human leads to food, following can make sense. If staying near humans reduces another danger, staying can make sense. If a human trail is easier to travel, using it can make sense. If one person has never caused harm, getting closer may make sense. The animal doesn't need to like you. It doesn't need to trust you. It doesn't even need to understand you. It only needs to decide that staying nearby is worth the risk. And that changes the way we should see these encounters. When a wild animal follows you, the real question isn't simply, why did it come closer? The better question is, what has it learned will happen when humans appear? Because somewhere in that animal's memory is a pattern, a person, a trail, a smell, a sound, a reward, a danger. And sometimes you are simply the newest part of that pattern. The wild animal may look like it is following you, but in reality, it may be following a lesson it learned long before you arrived.